Hey, welcome back to the How to Podcast series. It's Dave with you. A little different. We're doing the shared mic sessions. What is this? Okay, well, I get to go on podcast as a guest, and it's so much fun that I want to share these episodes with you because some of these have been a while ago, and you probably have never heard me as a guest. You hear me as a host here all the time. You're like, well, what if Dave was a guest? What would that sound like? Well, this is me on a podcast, and I wanted to share it with you. As part of our daily episodes in 2026, it's a chance to hear me on another show. I hope you're ready for this. Are you? I had the opportunity to go on Gabe Leal's podcast. It's called Podcast About Podcasting. There you go. How's that for a name of a show? Isn't that good? Yeah, that's great. And Gabe had me on. Gabe is such a great guy. I've seen him in clubhouse rooms. I've been listening to his show for a long time. He's got great guests on there, and I don't know how I snuck my way onto his show, but he's had really great guests on the podcast, and just an amazing man. I love being on a show, and he's got really cool artwork too. He puts a lot of time and effort into this, and makes me a little bit jealous. I know I could do better, but watching Gabe and how he navigates podcasting, just a great person. And if you're looking for yet another podcast about podcasting, it's right in the name, Podcast About Podcasting. So, Gabe, great show. Thank you for allowing me to grace your amazing show. As a listener, it's always fun to be a guest on a show that you listen to. And I hope that when you go on a podcast as a guest, you bring that kind of energy, that you're a representation of the audience. You're not just a random stranger coming on somebody else's show. You actually listen to a podcast ahead of time, understand the tone of the show and how the show operates. So when you're on there, nothing's a surprise. And you'll catch on to some of the more familiar questions that maybe your host asks of you when you're a guest. But just being on a show is a great opportunity. So here's my time with Gabe on the Podcast About Podcasting with Gabe. Here we go.
What if the secret to podcasting isn't better gear, bigger numbers, or going viral? What if it's simply pressing record? In this episode of Podcast About Podcasting, Gabe Leal sits down with podcaster, creator, and community builder Dave Campbell to unpack what it really takes to build a podcast that lasts. From creating over 2,000 episodes across multiple shows to building deep audience connections one listener at a time, Dave shares why the future of podcasting belongs to creators willing to stop chasing perfection and start serving people. You'll hear powerful insights on why podcasting has no gatekeepers, how to focus on your audience instead of yourself, the mindset shift that keeps creators from quitting after 5 episodes, building sustainable systems and content workflows, and why even one listener can change everything. This isn't a conversation about becoming famous. It's about finding your voice, building meaningful connections, and creating something that matters. So grab your mic, silence the doubt, and hit record, because your audience is waiting.
Okay, I'm just jumping in here. I know I'm not really supposed to do this because we're listening to Gabe's show, but what a great intro. Stick around to the end because Gabe also does an outro. I just thought this was really a cool way to introduce your guest without doing the whole LinkedIn bio, which we all just like to test, right? That's such a great, cool way to do that. And the fact that he has a different voice to start the show, come on. Anyway, here's Gabe.
What I considered seasoned podcasters, because the idea of creating this show was that I do want to get new and aspiring podcasters who haven't taken that first step yet to jump into this world of podcasting based off of the idea of wanting to start a show. And then secondly, how to sustain something for the long term, because that's the magic sauce that gets left out on a lot of shows when I hear them talking about the podcast and how to podcast and how to build something is the ability to make it sustainable. So Dave Campbell, let's start with you. We're going to go with the first question that I've asked every single guest that I bring onto the show. Why should you start a podcast? You have an idea, you have a concept, you have content that you think you're really passionate about, but why a podcast? And why not write a blog or create YouTube videos? Why get behind a microphone and say, I'm going to record and do a podcast?
If you are a writer, a blog makes a lot of sense. I'm not a writer. So speaking for me is probably easier. I can turn it around a lot faster. I'm a musician. I've been doing music for a long time. So I'm used to being on the mic in bands and on stage. So I have that kind of going for me already. So for me, it just made logical sense that a podcast would be a good starting point for me. And I love talking to and meeting people through casting as well. So it's opened a lot of doors.
Yeah. And I like that. You kind of leading into the next part about it. So you said that podcasting changed your life through connecting with other people. Walk me back to the moment you realized that having these conversations became real and not some, idea or summary, that having conversations really did change who you were and what you got out of connecting with people in general through the power of an hour long or 30-minute conversation.
Yeah. When people started reaching out as listeners and connecting was when I'm like, oh, this is a real thing. Like I'm actually getting into the hearts and minds and ears of people around the world. It's just the coolest experience ever to know that your voice can travel so far, right? So between the guests on the show and then the listeners, I think that combination of the two. Once I started hearing back from people and connecting with people, I'm on a mission in my life to collect as many people in my life as possible. That's kind of my goal. So I've added you to my collection, Gabe. So that's my goal. And I think podcasting has opened the door to do that and very quickly.
Yes. And one of the other things that I've kind of developed in doing this show was the understanding that for most podcasters, not all, but for most podcasters, is a realization that what they take from the actual conversation, other than just being a host, like the connection that develops between you and a guest or you and an audience, that shifts how you approach things, because now you have a power that you didn't realize that you had prior to doing a podcast. Like you have a power to connect with people and shift and change people's ideas or influence. And there's a lot of responsibility that goes with that. And I want to make that clear for a lot of podcasters starting out here. You can have a powerful voice and you can influence people's lives, but hopefully that there's something good that comes out of what you're creating and what you're putting out into the world. So you said that there are no rules. I want to question you on that because this show exists specifically to answer whether someone should podcast at all. But if there are no rules in how you approach podcasting, what's the right answer then for if podcasting is right for everybody?
So if there's rules, that means if you break the rules, you're not allowed to be here, right? A rule keeps people, like, let's say, like there's the pool, no diving at the pool. If you dive in the pool, you have to leave. That's a rule. In podcasting, if there's rules, then there's the chance that some people won't meet the expectations of the rules, and then there's no room for you. So if you go to an amusement park, they have a sign that says you must be this tall to ride this ride. That's a rule. For your safety, it makes sense. Right. But if we go around in podcasting and put up rules saying you have to do it this way, and if you do it that way or not my way, then you're not welcome here. I want to go around and tear down every sign that keeps people from starting a podcast, that makes you feel like you're not welcome here because of where you came from, your education, your finances, your influence, your name, right? I want to get rid of all that. If we could really make podcasting what it was meant to be, gatekeep free, like there's no gatekeeper,
right?
Then that's the rules that I want to pull down. So between our shows, that's what I want to encourage people that are listening and watching this, that listen, there's a space for you here, and you don't have to follow some arbitrary rule that I made up to be able to be a part of podcasting.
Yeah, I love that, because this is to the idea is that I want my show will focus primarily on the new and the emerging podcasters who's getting started. The seasoned people, I mean, they've gone through it, right? I mean, what I want from them is the acquired knowledge that they have, like all the scrapes, the bumps and bruises, the scar tissue that comes from doing these things, so that it lessens, hopefully, the resistance for new podcasters getting started to, again, jump into this field. Because one of the most shocking stats that I did when I'm researching whether or not to start this show was people were saying the podcast market is saturated, right? That there's so many podcasters and everything else. Yet projections will tell you, if you go look at these statistics, it'll be a $50 billion industry by the year 2030. We're not that far off. We're 4 years from there.
Right.
And it's going to be a $50 billion industry. What does that tell you about whether or not the market is saturated and there's not enough here, right?
Yeah.
I think it is the people that hide behind the gates, the gatekeepers that want to keep certain aspects about it from people getting started and building a voice. Well, yeah, the point is to lessen that resistance again to get started. So in creating a podcast, you sit down, you said, okay, no rules, but we're gonna hit record. What would you say would be the next step that, say, a brand new podcaster would learn, or what would you advise them to learn, other than just hitting record and saying, okay, it's done, I've recorded my conversation, or I've recorded my solo podcast? What's the next step that they need to really focus on that'll help them build something that can be sustainable for the long run?
Starting points always kind of seem to go back to identifying your audience and who you're serving through your show. Because if you don't know who you're serving, it's really hard to create content or bring on the right guests or create the right topic because you don't really know who you're talking to. So if I was creating a restaurant, I want to know who my clientele is so I could serve them well and meet their expectations. So I'm going to create the food at my restaurant that's going to bring people through the door. I want to make sure my food is good. So I'm going to ask for people to taste it to make sure it's good. I want to make sure everything is the way it should be. So when I open the doors to my community, I'm meeting the needs, right? So and same in podcasting. I want to create the content that's going to serve my audience. I want to make sure it's good. So I'm going to put it in front of people I trust and say, can you check this out and make sure that this is here's my expectations. And do you think I'm meeting this? So getting feedback. And I think all that comes through community. And I'm on a mission as well, Gabe, to reinforce that nobody should podcast alone. I think you should have somebody in your world, right? Like I talked to my wife about podcasting. She kind of rolls her eyes like, oh, this again, right? It's like, can you talk about anything else besides podcasting? But so I need somebody in my life that embraces that, who understands what it's like to create content and go through all the seasons of podcast creation, right? So we need those people in our life. So that's kind of who I want to surround myself.
I like that. Now, this is a part that I like to really jump into for a lot of podcasters, because we're going to jump in a little bit into the technical side. We need to know that we're getting to the idea of the why. Now let's get into that side. So, when you share the idea of building a back-end system, a workflow, what are some of the things that maybe you've heard other new podcasters, to prevent them from making the wrong sort of moves that alleviate the stress of having to go do double work and having to do things over and over again, so that, most of us podcasters, we do have busy lives. We do have, some of us have full-time jobs. We start out with doing this as a hobby and decide to move into it with more intention. So what do you do in your back-end systems that you would share that maybe will help, again, somebody new sitting down and deciding whether or not should I start a podcast in 2026?
So again, going back to feedback is helpful. Getting some coaching, getting somebody on your side who's further down the road from you that could really help you. I try to have 3 people in my life, somebody ahead of me that I look up to, that I can kind of grow towards. I have somebody beside me who's kind of at the peer level, who's kind of where I'm at, and then somebody behind me who's just starting, who looks to me as maybe an inspiration. And those are the 3 people I like to focus on. And if I could have that combination of those 3, someone ahead of me, someone with me, and someone who looks up to me, then I have like a really well-rounded approach to what I'm doing. I think the other part of this is where I see a lot of podcasters struggle is they run out of content ideas quickly. They start a show and then 5 episodes in, they're like, now what do I talk about? Like the excitement and the hype of starting it is great, but then there's the longevity of it, and then you're like, wow, now I got to do this every week, twice a month, every day. I'm doing a daily podcast right now. So 365 episodes in a row, right? So I'm like day 79, day 80 right now as a time recording. So every single day I have a podcast episode. And then I have 8 other shows as well. I have 9 different podcasts that I host. So I'm creating 12 to 15 episodes a week right now. for all my different shows. So for me, the way I keep track of my content is I treat life like a piece of clothing where everything sticks to you, like that sweater. You're like,
Right.
you're picking off this lint, like, where'd that come from? Where'd this hair come from? Right. I think you should let life stick to you. So as you just go around your day and as you do things, ideas are going to come to you. Thoughts are going to come to you. You're going to see something on TikTok. You're going to hear it on a podcast. I just email myself all these things, these momentary pieces of my life. And I just have a folder and I just put everything there in my folders. And when I come to sit down to do my recordings, I just go to my folder, pull up my list of things that caught my attention. And that's where I start from. So just let life stick to you. And that's going to help you to define your content. So again, going back to the beginning, though, you got to know who you're talking to so that you can find the content to serve them well. So start there.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot because there's a lot. I tell people in doing research, just like you said, go to any podcasting directory on Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your podcast. Type in a random podcast name, and you'll see how many of them kind of just branch off. You'll see that they have the 4 episodes or 5 episodes, and then there's nothing else. And you're like, what was it? What eventually led to them walking away? Was it the fact that the work was a little too daunting, or was it that, the subject matter, they ran out of it?
Right.
That there's a lot that goes in play into that. And I would hope, in what I'm trying to create here will help people understand, like there's a lot of front end, there's a lot of back end work that goes into actually what we're doing now. This is the fun part. This is the part that everybody just enjoys is the conversation, like getting here, but it's the build up to everything else. Right. Yeah. So how do you go about finding your guests when you invite them on, when you do an interview show? Do you have a particular vetting process? Is it people within your community? Do you get secondhand recommendations from people saying you should speak with this person? How do you find the guests that you invite on?
So each of my shows are different. I have a dad podcast. I have an author podcast. I have a music podcast. I have a children's podcast. I have a podcast about podcasting. I have all these different things, right? So for my author podcast, what I find interesting about that show is I'm not an author and I'm the host of the podcast. So when I meet an author, they're anticipating that I've written a book and I've never written a book. So I am completely a novice to anything to do with publishing, right? So by being the non-author host, I represent my audience. I represent the audience of authors who are just starting, listening to the show. And I represent the readers who will never write a book. But we get to have conversations with these authors that they don't get anywhere else because they're usually going on shows that are hosted by a fellow author. And you get 2 authors together, they do author talk. And I have no idea what they're saying, right? I have no idea what you're saying. So I wanted to be the alternative to that. So for that show, imagine trying to get my first 5 guests on that show, right? I'm reaching out to authors saying, hi, my name is Dave. Would you like to come on my podcast, Living the Next Chapter? And they're like, who are you? And I'm like, well, I'm a guy that reads books. They're like, you're not even an author? No, thanks. I've got a lot of no thanks at the beginning.
Wow.
Right? Now I'm at 750 episodes for that show over 3 years. I have more people reaching out to my show than ever before, to the point where I've actually shut off my emails because I can't keep up. There's that kind of, that happens, right? And all I do in that show, Gabe, is I just show up and serve my guests to the best of my ability and be curious and give them the best conversation they've had on a podcast. That's my goal. If I can leave them at the end of the conversation going, my gosh, that was the best time I've had on a show for a long time. Thank you. Like that's meaningful for me. And I get to serve them well. I make no money from that show. I don't have any ads. I have no sponsors, but I just serve my guest and it's great.
I love that. So as somebody who does a podcast about podcasting, let me pick your brain.
Yes.
There we go down this line. So what do you say is probably the biggest challenges that you have from audience members when it comes to asking the questions about, I'm interested in getting started in podcasting? Is it from the content side? Is it the tech side? Or is it like the distribution or the promotion side? Where do you figure most of your audience comes wanting to dig information from what you're talking about?
If they're starting, there's some tech questions, but it's podcasting getting easier and easier as we go. More tools are coming out, making things faster and simplifying a lot of the tech side of what we do in podcasting, which is great. That means that, again, no gatekeeping. Text not something that's going to keep people out. So that's good.
Right.
That's a good win. I like that. So the starting part, there's just some of the basics and just getting them set up. And then understanding kind of the process of how a podcast gets from your microphone to someone's ears, those kind of questions, right? And then just a basic setup, getting them on all the app platforms. That's fine. That's part of it. And then the content creation and the calendar of just kind of coming up with something, some ideas, right? And being able to map out where you want to go in your show. Great. Identifying your audience, all those things. Then you get into making money with your show and growing your show. That seems to be a common thing that most podcasters are going to ask about. And when I hear somebody say, "Hey, Gabe, I want to grow my show," when people ask me that, I'm like, "What do you mean by grow?" And they're like, "What do you mean? What do I mean by grow?" I'm like, "Well, what if growing your show means growing the depth of your connection with your audience? Not numerically, but now I know the name of my listener, and I know that Keith listens to my show, and he lives in Scotland." And he listens to my show when he walks the dog by the ocean. Yeah. So when I record my episode, I'm thinking of Keith. I know that I have Eric who lives in Texas, down where you are. And Eric is a real estate agent, and he's an amazing human being. And he's also a Santa at Christmas. He's got the big white beard. He's an amazing guy. But he listens to every episode of my show. Every day he listens to my show. So once you get to that level of connection, that's growth. I've grown my audience by growing the depth of my connection with my audience. It's not getting bigger, but it's getting deeper, right? So that's growth, right? So when somebody says, "I want to grow my show," I'm always pushing back saying, "Well, grow how?" Right? Yeah. So little things like that. So that's where we would go once you have your show set up.
Yeah. And when it comes to, say, doing those types of conversations, do you get into the reality of letting them know that this is there? It's very, very rare that there's an overnight success, right? That there's somebody that launches and they go into the stratosphere of like Joe Rogan or the, talk or Call My Daddy podcast or whatever the hell.
Yeah.
But that's not, that's the exception to the rule. But for most podcasters who want to get started, they do have this idea, this grandiose idea in their head that I can get to that level. And not that that's a bad thing to have that as a goal, but to also give them the idea it takes work to get there. Like, how good are you at marketing? How good are you at promotion? So I want to get into that part of it too, because for a lot of podcasters, they do seem to struggle when it comes to promotion, especially self-promotion, because here's the thing that I've taken out of this. So I've had already about 16 conversations now with podcasting hosts. And a lot of them, the thing that really touched on was that in the beginning, I had a hard time promoting myself, like talking about myself. So how do you rationalize that for somebody who's getting started to say, you're going to have to learn how to, bolster your own number, or not bolster your own numbers, but bolster your own self so that people will want to listen in so you can get the opportunity to build and grow a deeper audience, a deeper connection.
When people come to me and they're a little bit shy about promoting themselves, I kind of turn it back to them and say, is this show about you or is it about your audience? Yeah. If your show's about your audience, don't you want them to know about it? Like, that would make sense, right? Yeah. You have a good, valuable show and there's great content, great guests. You're putting your heart and soul into this. It's not something you're doing just because you're bored. You really want to create a great show. So there's a lot of value in what you do. Don't you think that people would love to hear about something valuable? Yeah. So then you need to talk about it. You need to get out there and share, because the more people that hear about your valuable show and the valuable content you create, the more people you can help. So it's not really about you as the host. It's more about your content and it's more about your audience. So the more you talk about it, the bigger your audience is going to grow, or the depth, again, of your audience will grow over time. So don't worry so much about it being all about you. Focus more on what the show can do for somebody else.
Yeah, I like that, because I think that's one thing that gets lost in translation when you're talking about promotion. They think it's about me. And if you feel bad about promoting yourself, that can be a hindrance to somebody who wanted to get a message out, right? And I think what you just shared there about focusing on your audience, like focusing on that community. Yeah, I think that would alleviate a lot of people finding a lot of the hard parts about talking about myself as a host. Not that it's a bad thing. I think self-promotion is just part of what we do, because you're going to have to learn how to promote and find these avenues. So what are some of the best channels that you would say people can go to promote and find an audience, right? They might have a message. They're starting out brand new. I don't have no community. I don't have members yet. What are some of the channels that they could possibly benefit from as far as putting out their podcast so they can start discovering who's going to listen, what their audience is? Even though your content is specific and it might be niche and you might be talking about comics or film or anime, you still have to find an audience for it to resonate with. So what are some of the channels that they could possibly go and search to maybe find that audience?
I love being in the room with people who talk about what I want to talk about. So I have a dad podcast. So for me to go to any kind of men's event, any kind of men's focused event, any dad focused event, great. I need to be there. And it's great to go to podcasting conferences because you get to meet podcasters. I get to meet people like you, right? So that would be great. But at the same time, I'm not really meeting the direct listener of my show. I'm meeting my peers, which is great. I think that's awesome to do that. But anytime you can meet somebody who's not your peer in podcasting, but your potential audience, then I think that's a great opportunity because you're in front of people who would be your ideal listener. So that's one. And the other part would be to be a guest on shows. I'm doing it right now, right? Be on someone else's podcast because we are talking to podcast listeners. We're talking to people who listen to shows. When I go on Instagram, not everybody on Instagram is a podcast listener, but everyone that's here right now with us is a podcast listener. So this is where you fish where the fish are, and this is where they are. So be on guest on podcasts, get your message out there and go and serve as a guest on your favorite podcast. Collaborate with other podcasters. We are probably the nicest people in content creation, us podcasters. We love helping each other, right? So go and give value, serve, be a guest, have other people on your show, collaborate. I love doing like shout outs with other people who I would actually say would be my competition in podcasting, really. But bringing their content into my show, shouting them out, giving them praise, supporting them, being out there in the community, pushing and lifting everyone else up around me. That's how we find our audience, and that's how we grow.
Yeah, I love that because again, in correlation to what we're doing here, I mean, we're doing something very similar, but the goal, but again, it's how you focus it, right? For me, it's the focus will be on the new and inspiring podcasters because I want to help people craft a voice, right? So that's my focus is on the new people, on the people who haven't started yet or want to sit down. There's something about their eagerness to want to learn, to get into it that I love having those conversations and being able to harness that type of energy to being excited to say, I am now a podcaster. I can do this. Like, this is incredible. That's the payoff for me. So this is why the reason I'm doing this show in segments. I'm starting out with podcasters who've developed, like you got 2,000 episodes. What can I teach you? I mean, what can I teach you as far as like the bumps and bruises of going through a podcast?
Right.
But I'm also, the next series will be, the emerging podcaster. I'm going to have podcasters on who are, no longer than 15 to 20 episodes because the beginning part's going to be fresh to them. Like asking you to go back and do you remember episode number 1? What was that like? Like the pitfalls, and you're going to be like, man, that's been years. Like you have to really activate the brain to go, what was that like?
Yeah.
So I want to do it in stages to where, again, and the next step after that is I'm going to go find 12 to 15 aspiring podcasters who've never created a podcast, but want to.
Beautiful.
And bring them on.
Yeah.
And give them the experience of being a guest. Like you said, this is this is why I love pros and experts who've spent the time into doing this, giving you the direct avenues of how to find and develop what it is that you're trying to do in an audience. So man, that's gold. So again, let's hit on that number because now I want to go into the ability to sustain 2,000 episodes, right? For most podcasters, beginning from episode number 1, they're like, no, I can't imagine. I can't fathom what it's like, but here you are. So what does it actually take to require that sort of discipline to sustain and create as many shows as you're creating, as creating many episodes that you're putting out there in the world that one of our new podcasters can take advice from and say, hey, maybe I can apply this to my journey. maybe I can resonate. I can take what Dave's message did and resonate with me to put into my system of how I want to go out and share my message out into the world.
Yeah. Well, first, don't compare episode 5 to my episode 2000. That's not fair to anybody. Please don't do that. Compare your episode 1 to my episode 1 if you want to compare something, right? That's a more of a fair comparison. But even then, there's so much new knowledge in podcasting all the time that you've got a head start compared to where I started. So keep that in mind. The best comparison is a comparison for yourself against yourself and getting better every episode. It's like golf. It's a game of one. You can play it in a group, but it's a game of one. You're playing against yourself. So improve on your game, practice, do your work behind the scenes. And then when it comes to walking up to the tee and teeing off for the first time, you've got all the background, you've hit the balls out into the field for days. You practice your mini putt. I'm super good at mini putt. That's about as far as I can go. But you've done the work behind the scenes. So then golf makes sense for you. So do the work behind the scenes in podcasting and it'll become easier for you over time. Half of my podcast episodes are interviews. So when you do that many interviews, you start to get a feel on how to do an interview and how to ask great questions. One of the biggest lessons I learned early in my podcasting days, Gabe, was, especially with a guest, and you're doing a great job of this, by the way, is listening and giving your guests room to talk. Because I was so anxious and I wanted to keep the conversation going that I would ask a question of my guests, and then before they finished, I would redirect them with the next question because my mind was spinning and I wanted to keep the conversation going, and I was excited. But my guests never got to finish their thought. They would be thinking out loud and they'd be coming to the conclusion, and I'd ask another question and divert them away. My audience reached out and they said, Dave, could you just let Gabe finish his thought? As a listener, I want to hear what Gabe has to say, right? Without you stepping on him. And I'm like, oh, and you know what's the benefit of learning that lesson? My wife actually loves that as well because I don't talk over her when she's talking. She's like, this podcast thing is actually not that bad. Even though I roll my eyes when you bring it up, I let my wife talk and I don't talk over her. And it's a good thing. So you'll be a better listener as well. Yeah. There's so many benefits to podcasting beyond making money and getting a big audience. You as a human being will be different in the process of creating a podcast. So do it for that.
Yeah. And, like you said, there's something there's an underlying tone that I've heard over all of these conversations is that most of these podcast hosts that I'm having these conversations with, that's one part of the messages is like, you become so much better at listening to people. Like, do you realize like how hard that is? How much of an acquired skill that is? Because like you said, in the beginning, the process was, I want to jump back in with my question. And one of the hosts said it very perfectly well. If you want to just talk about you, do a solo show.
Right.
Nobody's saying that's wrong.
Yeah.
Like if that's the thing that you want to do and you want to focus on and all the thoughts that pop in your head, go ahead and do a solo show. But if you're going to have an interview and you're going to have a guest on, let your guest be the center point of the conversation, not me. That's why I try to listen, because I'm also taking notes and trying to learn something myself from this conversation. I try to take that with every single like interview that I get to do, whether I am a guest or the host itself. I'm trying to take something from what we're discussing because it only helps me develop, again, like you said, as a better person. My wife is super appreciative and I do a live stream with her. We do a show together. So
there you go.
It is learning how to, branch off each other and communicate with each other. It only strengthens things. So I like that you did bring that up. So now I want to touch on one more thing before we start wrapping up. So what would you say to somebody who has started their podcast, published it, went out, started to try to, and went out and promoted it, and yet they're not finding traction. They're not finding an audience, getting 5 downloads a week, 20, maybe 15 downloads a month. Like, what would you say to somebody who's getting frustrated with saying, I'm putting in all this work, I'm doing this, I'm sharing it out into the world, and I'm not finding the right audience yet. I'm not finding anybody who's, building that, again, that community, that audience that you want. How would you redirect them to maybe refocusing or shifting their approach?
I actually did this with a podcaster recently, and I said to them, what's the minimum number of people you'd podcast for? Minimum. Not the maximum, the minimum that you would show up for. You would create the content, record the content, publish the content, do all the behind the scenes. What's the minimum? And they just looked at me like no one's ever asked me that question before. And I said, well, for me, if I was answering my own question, I would say one. If I could reach one person, and it sounds like, Dave, that's pretty low bar. Like, come on, one? You would podcast for one person? Yeah, I would. And the reason why, and I actually did a little mini series on my show around an apple seed. And I don't know if you've ever heard this before, Gabe, but
No.
There's a quote that I heard a long time ago. And it said, you can count the number of seeds in an apple, but you can't count the number of apples in a seed. So you can cut an apple open, you can pick out all the apples, you can put them on the table, and there's 23 seeds. Pick up any one of those seeds and tell me, okay, how many apples are going to be the result of that one seed? You can't do it. There's no way to measure that, right? Now, imagine if somebody listens to your podcast and because of your show, they go home and treat their partner better. They're a better parent for their kids, and their kids grow up in a new environment because of your show. Imagine if that person who is on a really destructive path in their life turned a corner because of your words, your guest, your content. And now where their life was ended to disaster, now they have a totally new path in life. On my Dad Space podcast in November, it's Movember, where it's about men's mental health and physical health. And I was talking on that, and there's a daily episode for Dad Space that I do in November. So 30 episodes in a row. I was talking about the fact that you need to, as guys, you need to own your mental health and you need to go get help from professionals. Don't try to do this yourself. I had a listener in New Zealand who reached out to me and said, Dave, I've been listening to your show, and because of your podcast, I've finally committed to going and getting the help I've always needed, but I just needed to hear it. And because of your show, I'm doing this. And now him and his children and his wife are benefiting from him getting the help he needs. I would podcast for one person if that was the result, one person. And I would be satisfied to not make one penny from my podcast, not have 2 listeners or 5 or 100,000. If I could reach one person, and I genuinely mean this, I would still do all the work I do just to do that one thing. You can count the number of seeds in an apple, but you can't count the number of apples in a seed.
I love that, man. That's what I speak to in my heart is impact. Right. You can't measure. It's an unmeasurable that people try to, look at, and you can't. Yes. It's too hard, but it does matter. So I love that you shared that. So again, listeners, take notes. That's the whole point of what we're doing here. So this is the fun part of the conversation where I get to ask, so what's on the horizon for Mr. Dave Campbell as far as the 9 shows that you're creating? Like, what else do you see? Do you ever see or envision yourself, since you're hosting one, writing a book on this or going down that avenue? Because you have so much content. I'm pretty sure you're content rich when it comes to what you can share your expertise on.
You know that thing where people have like a stick, and then they put a plate on top of the stick, and then they spin the plate, and then this plate spinning, and they have multiple sticks and multiple plates. Yes. I have 9 of those going at the same time. Some of them are wobbling right now. Just by the way, I got to pay attention to those. But I'm doing all these things at the same time, and I don't know what's next for me. I just know that I'm in podcasting now, and I can't get out. So I love it. For the How to Podcast series, I'm doing the daily episodes, I said. So that's 365 episodes this year. In February, I did 24 episodes in 24 hours, a little marathon I gave myself, where I recorded an episode every hour and published it every hour for 24 hours straight. So by 3 a.m., Gabe, I was like a puddle. I was just, right. So, but I did it every episode, every hour. So that was fun. That's really exciting for me. I'm also doing daily content on a social platform at the same time. So every day I'm showing up and talking to my audience. And then I have all my other shows, right? So I just keep pouring into each of the shows. And again, for that reason of just connecting with that one person, right? So I don't see an end to it. I would love to get to 10. That'd be an even number of podcasts. My wife is like, no, if I was to start another podcast, Gabe, it would be a local podcast for my local community, because there's a lack of local content in our communities these days, right? Everyone's leaving. So TV's gone, newspaper's gone, radio's leaving. I'd much rather do a live podcast or a podcast focused on my community. So that's kind of where I would love to go next. But again, the wife said no. So But yeah, so that's where I would love to go. Writing a book would be great. There's a lot of opportunities out there. Meeting people like you is great. And again, collecting people. That's my main focus.
I love that. Because one of the things that I'm trying to do here too is I'm going that route of trying to find here in our local town, a local library where I can start a podcasting class.
Nice.
Because we do have a library here locally that they just opened a couple months ago that has its own podcasting studio. So why not start a class to get people to come in here, and instead of just doing what I'm doing virtually, also do locally in person to help build another community around doing this and getting started. So I love that, though. I would love that for you if you could. I mean, maybe the wife's like drop 2 of those shows and you can get going, but.
Right.
Thank you again, Dave. I do appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation. It's been great. And I'm taking so much from what you shared, and I want to be able to put it out into the world for people who want to get started into doing this, because again, there is something about being able to craft your voice that will make an impact on that one person, right? That's to me, that's what matters. We've said every word that can be said, every note that it can be played has been played, but sometimes it's where it comes from, and the person that, that message you're the conduit to that message for somebody that's going to actually resonate to them. They could have heard it from 2 other people, 3 other people. It could have been a family member. It could have been somebody else, but yet it was your voice. It was your message that seeped through and allowed them to hopefully change their life for the better. So I love that.
Great.
Thank you again, Dave. I'm grateful.
Excellent. Thanks, Gabe. And if you want to throw it in the notes, I have my sign off for everyone. giftfromdave.com is my free gift to anybody who listens to your episode. And all that is really is a link in my calendar for time. So anytime they can use that, giftfromdave.com. There you go. My website.
There you go. All right. It's there. It's going to be part of the episode. So thank you, Dave. I do appreciate it. I got to go let my dog out.
There you go.
So I gotta run, but thank you for the time. And like I said, I will be reaching out to you, and I would love to join that community as well.
Excellent. Thanks, Gabe. Great show. Love your show, man. Good job. Keep going.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And that wraps up another episode of Podcast About Podcasting with Gabe Leal. A huge thank you to Dave Campbell for sharing his wisdom, experience, and heart for helping creators build podcasts that truly connect with people. If today's conversation resonated with you, make sure you go follow Dave Campbell and check out everything he's building over at howtopodcast.ca. You'll find his podcasts, creator resources, community meetups, coaching, and a ton of practical advice to help you grow as a podcaster without losing your voice in the process. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow and subscribe to Podcast About Podcasting wherever you listen to podcasts. Most importantly, if these conversations, insights, and stories are helping you, share this episode with another podcaster, creator, or aspiring beginner who's thinking about starting their show. Sometimes one conversation is all it takes to help someone finally press record. Until next time, keep creating, keep learning, and keep podcasting.
So there you go. A great episode with Gabe. Again, I love being on podcasts. I love kind of getting a behind the scenes look at how somebody else does their show as well. Another advantage for you to be a guest on more podcasts. You get to see their intake, how they bring you on, how they prep you for the show, all of their emails and their confirmations and their calendar, and just you get to see every little bit of the show. And as a listener of the show, you appreciate the show even more when you go back and listen to the next episode after yours is done. That you're like, I got to spend time with Gabe, and he's just a fabulous guy and super organized. I do really, really enjoy the intro and outro. I thought that was really smart. I'm just really not a fan of the 5-minute LinkedIn bio read. Those are so, to me, very lame. They're just so, I don't enjoy them as a listener. I don't enjoy them at all. And I think they're not creative. This is creative. I really love what Gabe does here. For my shows, I don't do what Gabe does, but I like this. I think this is a great alternative to how I do my show. And I'm leaning this way. I think I really enjoy this. So think about this for your show. Think about your intros. Think about your outros when you have a guest on your show. How can you make them more engaging for the listener? Having a different voice is always interesting as well, because it's not the same voice all the way through. There's a lot of good stuff here. And go check out Gabe's podcast. It's the podcast about podcasting. It's right in the name. And I'm sure you're going to enjoy Gabe's guests. And he's a great guy. So go check it out. Thanks for listening. I'll have a link in the show notes for you to go check out Gabe. Go give him some love, okay? He deserves it. Thanks, Gabe, for letting me be on your show. You're still here. Okay, great. I had a question from a podcaster. They want to do a podcast where they play clips from movies, they play clips from music, they play clips from television. And they said, Dave, how do I get around this? Because every time I upload my podcast to Spotify or YouTube, I get flagged for copyright. And that's the problem. See, people will use this term fair use, in that if I only use a certain percentage of time of the clip, so like 10 seconds, 5 seconds, 15 seconds, I should be fine because it's under a certain amount of time. These tools that are there now for Spotify and Apple and YouTube, all the other ones, they're really good. They're not usually humans now, they're usually AI, and they are just going through our content with a fine-tooth comb, looking for stuff that's not ours to use in our show. Fair use is a way to stand up for yourself in court, and basically, from my understanding of fair use, it's around you using a clip and then doing like your comments about it and, that kind of thing. And that should protect you. Now, fair use is there when you have already gotten into trouble. You're sitting there with your lawyer, which you've paid for to be there on your behalf. And then you're going to argue fair use to a judge. So if you want to get that far in the process, then you can use fair use as a flag to plant in your podcast and go, well, it's fair use. Understanding that you're going to be hiring a lawyer to actually get you past that. And if you get caught and you're doing this flagrantly, like you're out there and people can find you and you don't care, or you think that a certain amount of time will keep you safe. Well, if I only stay under this amount of time, then no one's coming after me. Good luck. Good luck with that. With the tools getting as good as they are, I don't know if we can really count on that. So I would talk to a podcast lawyer. There's a gentleman, his name is Gordon Firemark. He brands himself as the podcast lawyer. You can find him online, Gordon Firemark. And Gordon is a podcast lawyer. He's got stuff on his website around this. And he's US based. I'm in Canada, so we have our own rules. But in general terms, what he talks about could go across anything. I would just consider the fact that when you use fair use, it always comes with a lawyer. And I don't know how many of you can afford a lawyer to protect you when you use content that's not yours in your podcast, but good luck. I would just avoid it if I were you. Or talk to a lawyer like Gordon Firemark. There you go. Need any help? Let me know.